Hello, now I will talk about some of the most commonly used opening strategies, and I'll start off with my personal favorite, which is basically dropping an armory quickly for everyone to build, and once it's done, I'll just activate auto build. Once it's done, you research mines, you also drop the RTs for the people to build on the sides, and you drop a second IP. Basically, you need to get out to build this one yourself, and when mines are done, which should be pretty fast, you can get one of the respawners to drop some in base, and then you'll have two IPs with mines, and depending on which split you use, you can start putting some big pressure. The advantages of having the second IP is, of course, you double the respawn rate, and there's also one less IP. Well, there's one more RP skulls have to bite down in order to, get you in trouble if they decide to rush. And then you still have the mines again as insurance against base rushes, since mines are very, very good against early skull crushes. So this is an opening I really like. It's really useful, and depending on the splits, you can maybe keep one guy in base to build all this stuff, and he can drop the mines as well when it's done, or you can do a bit more offensive splits and, like I said, build the IP yourself and then just wait until somebody respawns to drop mines. Worst case scenario, you can always send one guy back from the sides to drop mines if you're thinking they might try to rush you. So that's one opening you can do. After this is set up, can have some options. You can probably focus on getting some more RTs at this point, because you need some rest income before you get the upgrades out. You'd like to get at least 4 RTs if possible. You can do it on 3, but it's gonna be more difficult. But if you can get up to 4 RTs, you can drop an art lab, and you can start with your upgrades. So what upgrades do you want first? Well, it also depends. Armor 1 will give your marines the ability to survive Parasite and 2-bite, meaning that if you've not heard this before, a skull can kill you with just 2 bites after he's parasited you, because the parasite does 10 damage and the bites do 75 damage, and you have 160 HP in general as a beginning marine. So giving armor 1 will allow your marines to survive the parasite 2-bite, and meaning the skulls have to do 3 bites at least to kill a marine, which is definitely useful in the early game. If, however, you're really confident in the aim of your marines and you think you'll have enough res flow to medpack them as well, you can just start with rushing weapons as well, because of course weapons will allow you to kill aliens much faster and will help you more in the late game than armor does, in my opinion. So rushing weapons is never a bad idea. Getting armor 1 before you go with weapon upgrade is my favorite, that's what I prefer to do. Now, you don't always have to go straight for your arms lab. Depending on which map you play, you might consider getting the phase gate and phase gates. Getting the observatory and phase gates up. On this map, Summit, is relatively small. I wouldn't advise you to get fast phase gates unless you wanted to try it out and see what happens. But on this map, it's generally small enough for marines to just run and reach different sites pretty fast. So on other maps, maybe like Caged or perhaps Jambi, you have a bit more space to cover as a marine on the field, and you might consider getting early phase gates. Now, this has some pros and cons. The cons obviously mean you won't be getting upgrades in the early game if you go for phase gates, because they are quite expensive. You have to get an ops, you have to research it, then you have to drop 2 gates at least, maybe 3 preferably, which is a lot of res, which could have gotten you maybe armor 1, weapons 1, and gotten you more kills in the early game. So this is always something to take in mind. If you go for the fast phase gates, it's a bit more of a gamble in the early game. It can really pay off if you manage to, say, get a phase gate and cross and then maybe get an offensive one here. You can sort of lane block these routes to your RTs behind him, and it will allow you to hold on to at least 5 RTs, maybe 6 with this one, which is really good. And once you've established this control, you can actually get out the arrays really fast, quite easily. But you still have to hold them, and it's not always easy to hold phase gates without upgrades. So again, depending on the map, it has its benefits, but it also has its disadvantages. And in general, if you're not sure what you want to go for, you can't do anything wrong with just dropping an arms lap and getting armor 1 up and weapons 1 afterwards. So another strategy is the arcs. Arcs are really expensive, so you definitely need a lot of res income for it. And you also need phase gates in order for arcs to work properly, so it's sort of a double risk you take if you go for the arcs fast. It's not commonly used to get arcs up quickly, definitely not on Summit, but on other maps, say for instance Fail, where you have the aliens going for nano and reinforcing it, and you need to clear it out, then you can maybe try to get the fast arcs and the phase gates. Or on maps like Tram, you could try an arc rush, because the hives in Tram are really easily arcable. But on maps like these, I would recommend not going for arcs anytime soon. Maybe not anytime, maybe just never on this map. But it's certainly something you can try out. The arcs, the robotics will also allow you to drop sentries, which is another risky strategy. Using the sentries instead of phase gates to defend areas, and give you some map control this way. It can also work out well, it can also backfire completely. It's one of the more risky plays you can try out. So these are sort of the most basic stuff. In the end game, you'll probably have to decide what kind of late tech you want. If you're good on res, you can always, and your Marines still have plenty of personal res, you can always just go for the Advanced Armory prototype lab and research jetpacks. I would never recommend researching exos, because there are too many disadvantages at using exos. One of them is that they're basically a liability. It's a big investment, and they go down pretty fast if they're not accompanied by another person welding them, and they're also not able to repair stuff, they're not able to phase, they can't move around as flexible as a normal Marine. So it's a big liability to get exos, and I would generally advise you never to go for them. But you can always try it out, see how it works. I've seen extra rushes before. I've not seen them work much, but it's always funny to see them. Still, I would advise you to go for jetpacks, and if you are really short on res, or Marines have already used up too many of their personal res, you can just get catpacks. Catpacks will allow you to rush hives and rush down life forms like Dionos. And it's generally pretty useful, but it's always costly to drop them as well, so you have to use them wisely. There's also a nano shield I see on the CC, but ever since the last patch it's not really as useful as it has been before, so I advise not to spend too much rest on that and just focus on weapon upgrades, maybe catpacks late game, jetpacks and shotguns. Now you might also wonder how viable the grenades are, and the grenade launchers and flamethrowers. And personally I think the only grenades worth using are the grass grenades, because they do damage to armor over time. So it's useless. It's useful if you do a big hive push to maybe drop some gas grenades in there as well. And otherwise, I would recommend not reaching certain, not getting grenades ever, because they don't do enough damage for their worth. And likewise with the flamethrowers and grenade launchers, they can be quite useful if you have one, maybe two of them when you push for a hive, but in every other situation they are quite useless. And since they are big PRS investments, I would advise your marines to stick with shotguns unless you really want one grenade launcher to push on a hive with them. One other thing you need to keep in mind when you decide which upgrades you want to get is you have to keep an eye on the match timer. You can basically see the match timer every time you use the tab. You can see it on the top. And things you have to watch out for are fade timings mostly, and Onos timing. Now, depending on how many harvesters the aliens have been able to hold, I'd say if they are able to hold, say, 3 RTs for most of the game, they will probably get some fades up at about the 8-minute mark, and the Onos will arrive around 13-14-minute mark, I guess. So these are the timings you need to worry about. If you are able to deny them, the RTs, you can delay them. You can delay certain upgrades, like maybe you want to save the shotguns until the phase pop, then you only get them at the 8-9-minute mark if you're able to delay them long enough. Or you want to save your phase gates when just before the phase pop, that's a good timing as well. You want to time your jetpacks if you're expecting Onos on the field soon. You kind of try to time your jetpacks if you have enough rest, so you always have to keep an eye on the time and be prepared for whatever may come in that certain time zone. You don't want to be caught off guard. Generally, once fates are about to come out, at this point you will want to research shotguns, and you will want to try to get some phase gate map control if you have not already gotten phase gates in the early game. It's definitely vital to get phase gates just before the phase pop out. So these were some of the commonly used strategies. I'll be going over some more map specific strategies in later videos, so hopefully you will check those out as well.